to talk about the brain in a very similar way, which is all about us protecting the brain from a really preventable illness. And this is a cover of National Geographic in September of 2017. So who grew up in their house with National Geographic? Yeah, there's a certain generation who just put their hands up, and there's a lot of other generation that didn't. So National Geographic is this magazine, it's glossy, it's printed in the US, and we never ever recycled it, right? We had stacks of it in our basement in our attic. And it was just really interesting to me to have the cover read the physiology of addiction. Here we have this quintessential American magazine trying to talk about how the brain breaks with addiction. And before you go give your talk at the middle school next week, I want you to go read the article and watch the video online just for some practice, because there are many pathways that are disrupted with a variety of substances in the brain. We're going to talk about the end pathway, because everything, whether it's an addiction to gambling, sex, nicotine, marijuana, opiates, it ends up in the final elemental part of the brain known as the reward circuit of the brain. The part of the brain that tells you to live or die, the part of the brain that tells you to wake up every morning and find food, find water, and send your genetic material forward. This is the part of the brain that every living creature on the planet has. Koalas, crickets, human beings, we all have this in our brain. How do we live long enough that we can create a couple generations ahead of us, and how do we keep them alive? That's really what drives us. Now, most of us didn't wake up this morning thinking like that. But I'm telling you, that is what actually drives us as living beings. And after the zombie apocalypse, right, this is where your brain will go. And it is this part of the brain that is impacted with addiction. And that's the problem with addiction, right? If I could pick it up and shove it anywhere else in the brain, honestly, you could literally point to any part of the brain, it would be better than here. And it just hit you in the visual cortex, and you lost your peripheral vision when you got addicted to something. Who cares, right? You wouldn't get to pitch on a pitcher's mound. You wouldn't get to drive at night, and I'd get you special glasses. Problem solved. But the part of the brain that tells you, I need to live or die, is the part that breaks with addiction. It's really very hard, and everybody in this room, so who in this room is in the service provider Rushford world? So about half the room, okay. And other people who didn't just put their hands up, other people in the room in the medical field, in the counseling field, working with young people, with youth, other people too? Okay. So most people in this room work with people who have either behavioral health issues, mental health issues, or struggle with substance use disorder. Not everybody, but there are very few of us in the country who don't know people who struggle. There are very few of us who have families that we didn't grow up in families where we didn't have cousins or moms who struggled with some sort of substance use disorder. It's such a common problem. So racing through this reward circuit of the brain is the neurotransmitter called dopamine. And how does dopamine make you feel? Awesome, absolutely, good with gold marks, right? It makes you feel fabulous, euphoric. It is the holy smokes, that was awesome, do it again chemical. That's what dopamine says to the brain. It says that behavior you just did is so good, it's going to keep you alive, and it's going to help further other generations. Do it again. That's what dopamine says. It has with it two specific behaviors, perseveration and compulsivity. I have to do this thing, I am unable to stop thinking about it. Those are fabulous behaviors when it comes to survival, right? You're designed to be this way. Your great-greats, you know what it was like to live in the Connecticut River Valley 200 years ago, forget 2,000 years ago, it was unbelievably challenging. If you could just imagine how hard it was 200 years ago. You were hungry most of the time. You had days where you had no calories coming in. And when you found that the salmon were spawning north on the Connecticut River, you were pumped. When you figured out you could make some net out of weaving together some reeds, you got some super dopamine, because you now have found a protein source and some calories that are going to keep your family alive. Your brain is pinging, good behavior, keep it going, right? So compulsivity and perseveration, I have to do this and I can't stop thinking, are fabulous when it comes to survival. It makes total sense why those would be two behaviors associated with dopamine. Those are two behaviors that define addiction. Right? For those of us that treat people who struggle, so often I'm like, oh my goodness, I've seen you 27 times in the last 4 months. Why aren't you better? That's what I say in my head. I would never say that out loud. But back in my head, I sometimes say that. And I take a breath, and in the front of my head, I think compulsion and perseveration, right? It is a cycle, this loop that is very hard to interrupt. And you know this, and return to use or relapse is unbelievably common. It's not just common, it's normal. It makes more sense to me that people would continue this behavior than interrupt it. And we're going to talk about why that is. So I make an argument that all of us have a baseline amount of dopamine in the brain. Everybody in this room is sitting at about 100. And there's some people who are these happy-go-lucky, golden retrievers who feel awesome most every day. Who's that in this room? one person is it? There's always somebody, and you see a few of us put our hands up. They're not the norm. They're awesome. All of us want to befriend them. My best friend is that, and I turn to her because she's my golden retriever. She always has a positive everything. She's just happy all the time. She's a joy to be around. But you and my friend Robin, they're the minority. A lot of us have normal levels, or actually a lot of us sit on the low side. So I actually have low dopamine. I think I sit at a 95 most days, and I work really hard to make myself feel good. So what are the things that make you feel good? Food? Yeah, food, absolutely. Food is a big dopamine spiker. Sometimes, though, it's often unhealthy foods that give us dopamine, right? I don't know, you guys have a candy drawer at your desk, right? Do you know who has chocolate in your office? I know everybody has chocolate in their office. And I just walk in, I do this, that little baby slide of like, give me more, I just walk in like this, and they reach in and they hand me what they think I need at that moment. It's terrible, because I have a sugar addiction. So yeah, food is a dopamine spiker, and it makes you feel better. It's not always the right choice, I acknowledge that, but it does make you feel better. What else do people do to make themselves feel good? Exercise, absolutely. Exercise is a good way to go, right? And that builds my dopamine. I exercise almost every day. When my kids were tiny, they would look at me and say, Mom, you were so crabby. Have you exercised today? And I'd say, no, because I have 3 toddlers. And they would say, why don't you go for a walk? And I would stay somewhat in the vicinity, and I would just speed walk around the building because I was so desperate to get out of the house, right? So exercise is a major dopamine spiker for many of us, and it helps build dopamine for anybody who wants their dopamine first. What are other things that make people feel good?
Close your ears. Good sex.
Yeah, sex is absolutely up there, nothing to close your ears about, but it's normal, healthy behavior, because that has to do with creating generations ahead of you. So absolutely, spike in dopamine, designed to be that way.
Okay.
Alcohol. Yeah, alcohol. All the addictive substances spike your dopamine, every one of them. But let's move away from the substances. What positive things you might do to make yourself feel good? What'd you say? Pets. Pets, connection. That's right, love and connection. Those are 2 of the best dopamine spikers there are. Meaning that sometimes when we're feeling down, I called my best friend of 30 years on the phone today. I've talked to her forever, and I was feeling a little down about my day. And I called her because I needed that human connection. I felt so much better when I hung up the phone, and that was dopamine, right? Falling in love, huge dopamine spike. And that has nothing to do with the physical part. It's just sort of, I am so deeply connected to you, that feels so good. And it's one of the things we need to train our kids in, is when you're down, when you're overwhelmed, let's build your toolbox. Like, who are your friends you can reach out to? And it doesn't have to always be on Snapchat, right? You can use this thing called a phone and talk to them. You can go visit people for a hike with each other, right? And I think that one of the things we encourage so many of our kids to do is move their bodies, right? Quieting down your body, being very present in this body right now, feeling your 2 sits bones on the chairs, both those feet on the floor, allows your system and your nervous system to quiet down. It is a dopamine spiker too. It's why mindfulness meditation and yoga are so helpful, why their impact on so many chronic diseases is so high. So training our kids to have healthy toolboxes to turn to for mood enhancement, as opposed to alcohol and food and all the other things we're about to talk about, is really critical. And that's what dopamine in the brain. Every addictive substance ends up in that reward circuit. So here's the deal. We're all sitting on average at 100 in this room, okay? A little low for me, a little high for her, but we're sitting at 100. And you find that perfect food, right? I opened up my chocolate Reese's peanut butter cup drawer, and there it was. You get a spike in dopamine. It goes to 150, and then it goes back to normal. You have sex, it's consensual, it goes to 200, and it goes back to normal. This is how we have survived for 200,000 years in this human form as this species. It is meant to be this way. The problem with the addictive substances is they start to break the wheel. With cocaine, your dopamine will shoot to 350. When you use a strong prescription opiate or heroin, it'll go between 500 and 900. When you use a drug like crystal methamphetamine, your dopamine will go to like 1,300. Huge spikes in dopamine, like crazy spikes, right? What about PCP? Depends on the quality of the product, but I would put it a little bit between probably opiates and methamphetamine. It's pretty darn high. And there's drugs are changing all the time. They shift a lot. The new meth that's now available coming to us from Mexico on the East Coast is much more potent than the old stuff is. So this 1,300 number I'm using could be 1,700 now. That drug is really, really addictive. So the way these drugs work in the dopamine system, I'm not going to do every drug, I'm not going to torture you guys, but there's an equation in the brain that governs how much dopamine is there, how much dopamine is produced, how many dopamine receptors are receiving the information on the other side of the synaptic cleft, and how many little vacuums or reuptake inhibitors are sucking the dopamine out. Those are the three things. Every addictive substance or behavior affects something in that equation. Cocaine does one thing. All it does is paralyze the vacuum. That little vacuum, it just stops working. It's like it got unplugged, and it just does nothing. And so there's nothing sucking dopamine out of the active part of the brain, and so the dopamine rises to 350, right? That's the problem. Now, you would think this would be such an easy problem to fix. I need a tiny little vaccine that makes that little vacuum immune to cocaine. That's all it will take. And then cocaine will have no impact. And cocaine use disorder will be solved. And instead, what's our treatment for cocaine use disorder? The finger wag. That's it. It's not good for you to stop using it. That's it. That's the only treatment we have. We do something called contingency management, where we pay people small gift cards to have another week where they don't use, and that's actually the most effective treatment. There is DBT, CBT, other sort of behavioral treatments, but nothing works very well. Yet, the mechanism of action is very simple, and there is a solution, but it doesn't exist yet. But in 20 years ago, somebody's working on this, okay? Opiates work in a different way. It has a much more complicated loop that goes through the mu opiate receptor, has a negative feedback loop on the GABA receptor. But at the end of the day, every opiate makes more dopamine, shovels more dopamine out to the active part of the brain. We do have treatment for opiate use disorder, and our treatment has to do with engaging with the mu opiate receptor and calming it down so it doesn't do this crazy feedback loop and create a destabilized brain. There's good treatment for an opiate use disorder. So here we have these brains that for 200,000 years have been normal at 100, and then on a great day, they go to 150 or 200. That's the way it's supposed to be, but it always goes back to normal. When your brain starts seeing levels of 350, 900, 1300, your brain says, what's happening? This isn't okay. This isn't normal. There's nothing in my 200,000-year history of being on this planet that says this is okay. Your brain's response to this is to down-regulate. It's to quiet it down, turn down the volume. It's going to stop making dopamine. It's going to get rid of 80% of your dopamine receptors. It's going to turn on every vacuum in sight to suck the dopamine out. So when you struggle with a substance use disorder, you wake up in the morning, your dopamine set point's like a 40. You're miserable. I'm not describing just physiologic withdrawal symptoms. Your brain has such a low critical neurotransmitter that it's not consistent with surviving as a human being, right? And your brain says, that's terrible. You can't be at 40. That's terrible. You know how to fix this. This is unacceptable. Fix it. Fix it. Go fix it. And what's the fast way to fix? Yeah, just continue the use. People continue their use of drugs, not because they're getting high anymore. You never get 1,300 again. You get it one, and you're done. You're chasing it for a long time, but you get diminishing returns each use. People continue their drug use just to feel normal. They continue to drink, they continue to use because they needed to get themselves up to a 90 that day because they needed to take care of their kids or do whatever it was that was on their day, right? It makes sense to me that people would continue to use. It makes a huge amount of sense because nobody in this room would feel good with dopamine afforded. You would be miserable. And you want to feel better. This is a normal way the brain responds. Make me better, you know how to do it. And the fast route through this is to continue to use. What's extraordinary is that you guys run a detox program. People who work for Russia run a detox, and people voluntarily walk in there and say, I am willing to feel miserable for the next 10 days, 30 days, 45 days to get to the other side of this. That's the extraordinary thing. That, I think, is extraordinary. Who works in a detox center? Is anybody in this room? I work in a detox center. It's one of my jobs that I have, and I had never been in a detox center until I took this job 3 years ago. It wasn't part of my medical training. It's not part of medical training. It should be. But, it's a room/building with 64 unbelievably miserable human beings. Like, they're in physical pain, they're in psychiatric pain, they're miserable. It's one of the most painful experiences of my 20 years as a doctor is working with people who struggle. Because it's not easy to be there, and I'm sitting with somebody, I'm like, I know you want to run. I know you want to run desperately, and I'm so proud that you're still right here. Because I know the easy fix is there, and you're in for the hard fix. So, this concept of the brain being broken. And this is our problem. This is the problem, and the reason I do this work is the medical system doesn't see it this way. The medical system, their response to addiction is like, I don't know, it feels like it's 100 years old. When you look at what our communities have done You know, I look at the fact that our public library is supporting this forum. You know, there's a flyer in the bathroom that talks about good public health people walking in this building and helping homeless people fill out housing forms. Like, how great is that? Like, community entities like Rushford and other preventive agencies do enormously fabulous work. Police officers have changed what they do. Police officers routinely carry Narcan in their vehicles and they save lives. You think the average uniformed officer 8 years ago thought they would be rescuing people on a day-to-day basis, that their job, they're not EMTs, they're police officers, would be to shoot a medicine up somebody's nose and save their lives? I work for a jail. My jail is going to be the first methadone clinic in the entire country outside of Rikers. I work and live in the middle of nowhere. And you know who made that happen? My sheriff. He was like, okay, you do what you need to do, make it happen. I was like, okay, we'll do that for you. So my point is, lots of people have changed in this problem. Medicine has been very slow to change. And I get to say that because I'm deep in this world of medicine. And this is the story that I'm going to tell you, because this happens every single day. And this absolutely happened in Middlesex ER this week. So this is a guy, he lives here in Middletown. It's 5:30 in the morning and he has crushing substernal chest pains, rubbing his sternum. And his wife looks at him and says, you look bad. And he said, no, it's okay, I'm okay. And she said, I'll call 911, right? You know, I got ambulance, I got fire, I got police. They're there in 7 minutes. And they look at him and they say, you're having a heart attack, right? Sublingual nitroglycerin, baby aspirin, beta blocker, before IV, they throw in some morphine. They take that EKG from his living room, because that's what we do these days, and we send it to Middlesex ER. Middlesex ER says, don't come here. Blah, 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 no, up Route 9, get to Hartford Heart Hospital, because this guy's having a massive anterior wall MI, and he needs bypass surgery. And they warm up that OR, and this guy ends up with quadruple bypass surgery in like 2 hours. And then he's on the post-surgical heart floor for another week, and then he's on telemetry for a week. He has a few complications. He comes back to Middlesex for 12 weeks of cardiac rehab. How much money could you spend on him? Thank you. Yeah, about $250,000. Hartford Hospital, really good, expensive. $250,000 on this guy. Okay, his next door neighbor on his street in Middletown is this kid. She's 24 years old. She went to a local high school here. She's a soccer superstar. She went to Boston College, first generation in her family to go to college. Got a Boston College soccer scholarship, fabulous. Sophomore year, she tears her right anterior cruciate ligament. She can't play. She has 2 surgeries. She can't get better. No matter what she does, she's lost her running ability. She can't kick. She's off the team. She's lost her scholarship. She's lost her ability to go to college. And this kid, her life is over from her perspective. And the only thing that makes her feel good is when she takes the prescribed oxycodone that the orthopedic surgeon gave her. For 6 weeks, she kept going back to that guy, and that guy kept prescribing. And after 6 weeks, he said, I don't know what's wrong, I'm cutting you off, because there's clearly a problem. And she began buying on the street, but who could afford that? Nobody. So she converted to heroin, because it's really available, it's really inexpensive. And so the last 3 years, this kid from Middletown has been running hard, fast, and furious, and everything that shouldn't go wrong for one of our kids has gone wrong for this kid. And about 9 months ago, she said, I'm done. I've had it. I'm 24, I'm done. Go back home, goes to Pinwell, goes to a local Suboxone clinic, goes to therapy, goes to yoga, goes to AA meetings. She's built her life back. She's working at a coffee shop right down the street. Things are great for this kid. 9 months she's been checking off every box of doing well. But this morning at 5:30, when her mom knocks on that bathroom door, it's locked and there's no response. And that mom's smart and she's scared. Kicks the door and finds her girl on the ground, blue and not breathing. She carries Narcan on her. She calls 911 first, starts CPR, and administers the first dose of Narcan. But her girl doesn't come back breathing again. But by that time, I had 2 patrol cars from Middletown, right there in her driveway. Each of them had 2 vials of Narcan. It takes 5 vials of Narcan before this young woman starts to breathe again. And they bring her down to the Middlesex ER. What happens to her? Plays around on the gurney, yep. She's vomiting and diarrhea, her bones are aching, she's full of shame. She's lying on the gurney, yep. And then what?
And if she's lucky, there's some mean PCTs and yell and scream at people and say, why do you keep doing this to yourself?
Yeah, so actually there's people there who make her feel terrible, right? Not only has she not given any help, and she's actually released, but before that happened, somebody gave her a giant shot of shame and blame, right? Which is probably the last thing this kid needed. She already feels bad enough. Nobody needs to power on. Because I didn't tell you the full story about her next door neighbor, that 68-year-old guy. Both of his parents had significant cardiovascular disease. His mom died of a stroke at 72. His dad died of a heart attack in his 50s. This guy used to be a 2-pack a day smoker. He's down to 1 pack. Great, good thing. Still smokes a pack a day. Kicks back a 12-pack of beer every day and goes to McDonald's at least 4 times a week. Does this guy have addiction? What's he addicted to?
Junk.
Yeah, lots of junk, yeah. And nicotine. and alcohol. 12-pack, nobody can deny this guy has an alcohol use disorder. You guys think he created his heart attack?
Absolutely.
Absolutely he did. I don't care about his genetics. Both his parents were smokers. You get rid of smoking in the family, there's no genetic risk. The number one killer in our country is tobacco. Number two, lack of exercise and poor diet. Number three is alcohol. Those are the three top killers. This guy partakes in all three of them, okay? This guy's an addict, and anybody roll into his living room and say, you know what, you're an addict and you created this heart attack, right? You absolutely do. Think I'm gonna drop $250,000 on you when you could have prevented this whole thing? Did anybody make him feel bad at any stage of his treatment? Ever. In his living room, in the hospital, in the post-surgical unit, was he shamed and blamed? This is what has to change. I'm a primary care doctor. I take care of people with chronic diseases all day long. That's my job. It's rare that I have somebody who's perfect in my office, right? You look pretty perfect to me. You look like you eat well, that you get enough sleep, you probably do yoga, right? She's verging on you taking really good care of yourself, but many people don't. I mean, lots of us, I don't know, I walked in, I saw the pizza, and I was like, pizza, right? And I know it's not good for me, but I love pizza, right? And a lot of us do things that we know aren't good. What's a sugar problem in this room? Okay, is sugar good for you? No. Yeah, we know this, right? All of us with our hands up, we know we have a problem, and we know it's not good for you. There's nothing good for you about sugar. There's no health benefit, zero, right? But yet we still have a problem, don't we?
But even if you do everything right, you can still wake up the next day and you can do everything.
Yes, that's right. There's doing everything right, and there's also bad luck. We don't get to control everything, but there are some things we do get to control. This guy may have died of a heart attack at 94 of natural causes, but at 68, a heart attack is not that common. And when you hear his story of all he's done, I'm telling you, he created his heart attack. It is what it is. And what bothers me about this story is that these two human beings presented to the medical system in the United States, and they got completely unequal treatment. Right? That's the problem. This has to change. Because you know what needed to happen with that kid? Somebody need to look at her and say, I talked to your mom, and I've heard how great you've been for 9 months, that you've been doing everything right. And guess what? When you start to feel good, when you start to feel normal again, it is unbelievably common. Dip your toe in one more time. Right? Relapse is common. And when do people do it? They do it between 6 and 15 months because they feel normal again. It's anticipated. And what do we need to do for this kid? We need to make sure that her netting underneath her is really tight. She just needs more support. She just got a job at the coffee house, right? Maybe she's not going to therapy as often as she was. Maybe she stopped going to meetings. Maybe she got her first paycheck yesterday. She may be a 9-month in recovery person who can't manage her own money, right? That's the conversation. Bring her mom in, have that conversation. You're not ready yet, and no shame or blame on that, but let's have somebody support you, right, managing your money, because that money is burning a hole in your pocket. She did not need to be made to feel like a piece of dirt in a year. Nobody needed to put in an IV, nobody needed to give her a script for anything. She's stable, she's got a good system in place. They just needed to have a nice conversation. Who needed to do that? A nurse or word clerk. Not a high licensed person, it doesn't take much. Not a penny needed to be spent, but we could have helped her a lot. This is not me going after Middlesex. This is every hospital in the entire nation. There's very few hospitals that do this well. Yale New Haven does this pretty well. Yale New Haven's been doing addiction work in the ER for a really long time. So they have a better system in place than the average does. So these are brains, PET scans, right? Slices, coronal shots of the brain. That middle column are healthy brains. That's a lot of us in this room. You see a lot of orange or dopamine racing around our healthy brains. The brains on the right are brains of people struggling with addiction. The top one's cocaine, the next one is crystal meth. You can see that's a really not good looking brain, like chunks taken out of it. The next one down is alcohol, and the final one is heroin. I want you to stare at the alcohol for a minute. Do you see there's a surprising amount of orange there? Alcohol is a really harmful drug in our society, very harmful. There are 10 to 13% of Americans have an alcohol use disorder, right? 10 to 13% of the people you know have an alcohol problem. But a lot of us are functional alcoholics, right? We live and work with functional alcoholics. And then after a while, they stop being so functional. But it takes a while for the wheels to fall off that bus. It takes a while before you have your third OUI, you got incarcerated, your wife walks out, and you lose your job. But it's a very common disease in our society, and it's incredibly harmful. When we look at who's incarcerated in a state system or a county system, 80 to 90% of people who are incarcerated with a substance use disorder, really half of them are there for alcohol, though. We spend a ton of our time thinking about opiates, but I will never underplay the harm that alcohol plays in our society. It's extremely harmful. So there's three things that are set up for addiction. The first one is genetics. The second one is early exposure while your brain is developing. And the final one is a history of childhood trauma. Having poor mental health does not necessarily mean that you will struggle with addiction. This is the rub though, okay? When you're 13 years old and you're struggling with terrible anxiety, and you're not getting what you need for your terrible anxiety, you're very likely to self-medicate. You're likely to drink, you're likely to use marijuana. Those are, I would say, the most common things to do. So the problem is that our teenagers are having this epidemic of anxiety and depression. And it doesn't mean they're weak or they're snowflakes. That's not true. You know what our kids are going through? You know, it's really hard to be a 10-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 17-year-old these days. I can't even tell you. I have teenagers at my house right now. It is incredibly hard for 1,000 reasons, but I'm going to just name a couple of them, right? I drop my kids off at school and there's 12 police cars at the school, and I look at them and I say, what's going on? And they're like, oh, it's a school lockdown drill, right? It's a day where once a month they got climb underneath their desks and they imagine what it feels like to have an active shooter in their classroom trying to murder them, right? And they plan about how it is that they're going to take that active shooter back. No adult in this room ever went through that, ever. We had fire drills, and sometimes you had to go outside in the rain, right? It is terrifying for our kids to be growing up in a society where they don't feel safe. And that's not made up. That's pretty legitimate stuff, right? I'm in Connecticut, where terrible things have happened. No wonder our kids have anxiety. It's also really hard to have that smartphone glued to your hand where everybody looks so darn perfect all the time, and you're comparing yourself to the Kardashians, and why does that one make $1 billion or whatever she does? You're comparing yourself to non-real people, right? Everybody posts on Instagram, nobody has a pimple. Everybody has their best outfit on, right? Nobody just rolled out of bed. It's a really hard time. It's hard to live in this age. So addressing the mental health needs of our adolescents is absolutely critical. And we do not have enough of this happening. Like, we should be piping in meditation and doing active yoga in every elementary, middle, and high school in the entire nation. Don't, right? It has to be happening because our kids will self-medicate. And it's the self-medication which leads to the early exposure in the developing brain. That's what leads to addiction. That's the problem. So the genetics of addiction are absolutely enormous. It's hard to find any disease in medicine with this much genetics. If you have a parent or a grandparent who struggles with addiction, you have about a 50% chance yourself to struggle with addiction. It's a big number, 50%, right? So who needs to hear that piece of information? Everybody. Everybody, yeah. But especially our kids. Especially our kids. Our kids need to know what their genetic risk is because, although that seems unfair, because you don't get to choose who your parents are, right? You don't get to choose your genetics. You tell your kids that they actually get to do something of their own volition that changes this totally, absolutely changes the genetics. And that is because all addiction is considered a developmental pediatric disease. It starts while your brain is developing. If you can get to the age of 24 or 25, fully formed brain, without ever having used an addictive substance, the rates of addiction are 2%. If you start off with genetics working against you, you started off at 50%, and you delay your use to age 24 or 25, the rates of addiction are 5%. They don't go to 0, and they don't quite get to the 2% because the genetics are still present, but it's about delaying your use, especially for the most vulnerable. That's all it takes, right? I have a preventable disease here, truly preventable. And if I had every 10-year-old in this town right here, and I said, if you do this one thing well for the next 14 years, really well, you'll never have cancer, they'd be like, okay, sign me up. What's it going to be, right? I don't get to eat Cheetos, okay? I will never eat Cheetos. We'll ban Cheetos from Middletown, right? But that isn't how it works. But here I have this. I have a thing that they get to control, and it's the reason why we need to tell our kids, is because it empowers them to make good decisions. And I think sometimes parents are like, it is impossible to never have used an addictive substance until 24. I disagree with that. I disagree, especially for our most vulnerable youth. And you all work with the most vulnerable youth. Who are our most vulnerable youth? Kids in foster care, right? Kids who are struggling with any mental health disorder, kids who are children of people with substance use disorder, they are people we should be spending a lot of resources on. Because treating this disease after it happens, boy, that costs a lot, right? Prevention, the work that is happening in this front row, this is what changes things, right? And how many of our schools really fund prevention well? Not many. So if you're 15 and you start drinking, and drinking here is defined as 2 drinks a week. That's it, just 2 drinks a week at the age of 15. 40% of those kids go on to be alcoholics. If you wait till age 21, 7%. That's just the the space, the chasm in time. Age 15 to 21, those are two very different people, right? It's just about delaying your use. And again, if you wait until age 24 or 25, the rates are going to be 2% or less. So that's the amazing thing. And I actually find, having spoken to lots of teenagers about this subject, they like this information. They like to know that they can control this. They can drive this bus. It does make me wonder, but why is the legal age 21? Right, if you guys were in charge of the world right now, and you're like, you know what, I know this much information right now, I'm gonna make a couple legislative actions like this. Drinking age, really, for purchase, should be 24, 25. I mean, nicotine, I want to ban it all, but right now, I mean, it's 21 in some towns in Connecticut, but it's not a statewide thing. But it really should be 25, right? That would erase it all. That's all it takes. This is just a legislative change, but no one, right? You think the liquor industry is going to allow that to happen? Never. Okay, so here's the rub. Can I ask you as my awesome teenager, what do you think of cigarettes? Right. Did you say smelly first? Smelly first, yeah. Disgusting is the #1 word our teenagers say about cigarettes. They think they're disgusting, revolting, horrifying. This generation is so smart about cigarettes because they've been educated. They have public health knowledge about how harmful tobacco is. I've had kids be like, it paralyzes the cilia in your sinuses and lungs. It's the #1 cause of bladder cancer. I'm like, yes, ma'am, it is. Both those things are facts. You're right on. They're super smart. And as the sense of harm with cigarettes has gone up, use has gone way down. We're going to get to vaping, I promise, but the use of tobacco, of cigarettes, was so low that this generation was going to get rid of it. This was the generation to get rid of tobacco. They were on track for that. I've been in a room with, 100 middle schoolers, and I said, do you know who Joe Camel is? Not a single person in the room knew who that was. How great is that, right? There's a mental image. I would like never to have that picture of that character in my head. So this generation's smartest because they got educated and they went down on their use. This is the problem. The sense of harm in marijuana is super low. Consequently, use is shooting up, right? So what do our kids say about pot?
It's harmless.
Harmless, doesn't hurt you. What else?
And natural.
It's natural, it's organic,
It's
it grows in the
natural.
ground, it's better than the pharmaceuticals. Can't get addicted, haven't heard that one.
It's good for you.
It helps me, it's medicine, it helps me sleep, it helps my anxiety, it cures cancer, I'm smarter in history class. I had kids tell me they're better athletes on the soccer field when they're high, and I'm like, oh no, my friend, I have to stop you there. Because there's no sport where having slowed reflexes is beneficial. None, zero, that makes no sense. Well, you guys have banged them out. One more that's very common. They compare it to something else.
It's legal. It's gonna be legal.
Right, so they do this one, they say it's legal. So first of all, there's no state where it's legal under 21. What it's worth. It is legal over 21 in, I don't know, we have to 15 states right now. Although the last 5 states to engage on it have said no to it. Illinois is voting on it tomorrow. It passed in the Senate. It's iffy in the House. That's just happening tomorrow. In talking to these guys, it feels like Connecticut has slowed down the brakes and it doesn't feel like it's happening this legislative session, right? So you guys for the minute are off the hook. So you guys got them all. What I was thinking is better than alcohol. There's always a direct comparison to the other legal harmful drug. And if you were on the debate team, that would be your argument, right? There's another drug out there that's super harmful, but you can get it down the street. People use it all the time. It's called alcohol. So why ban one if you haven't banned the other? There's always that argument. Okay, sense of harm, really low, use is going up. So let's talk about the brain in my one example of this room, brain of this 8th grader right here. Something really critical, many things actually, happen to the brain between the ages of 12 and 24. The brain doesn't stop developing or changing when you're 7. It really keeps changing. Between 12 and 24, 3 things happen. And the first one is called synaptic refinement. There are tens of billions of neurons in your brain at the age of 7, 8, and 10. Huge, tangled mess of information. And what must happen during adolescence is you need to clean house. You need to get rid of as much of a third of the synapses. You need to prune it back because it's a mess in there. And this only happens during adolescence. By 24, it's done. And after that, you just enter into the atrophy stage. That's where I am. So synaptic refinement happens. Second thing is myelination, or ensheathing these rapid highways or pathways. You insulate pathways that you want to hold on to. In the dusty roads you don't insulate them and they go away. So two of the 3 things that happen during this age. Our teenagers are spectacular. Their brains are perfect. They're doing what they're supposed to do, even if it makes you crazy. As a parent, it causes me huge stress and anxiety. These kids are about not having any wall ceilings, right? They're trying to figure out, what do I need to get rid of? What do I need to hold on to? And in order to figure that stuff out, you have to be a risk taker. You have to have some impulse issues. You have to be act first, think way later. They tend to have very strong exertional needs, a lot of physical sensation seeking, a huge emotional spectrum, right? I'm not being sexist here, I have 2 girls and a boy, but I have to say my girls, one of my girls in particular, I'll walk in the door and she'll be like, oh Mom, you're so pretty, I like your outfit today, and then 7 seconds later she's screaming at me and crying. I haven't said a word, I haven't even put down my work bag, nothing, and I'm like, wow, I don't know what just happened, but I got a teenage girl in front of me, right? The emotional spectrum is huge on these girls, and boys too. Very strongly influenced by peers and friends. This is the age of being hypersensitive to social exclusion. This is the only age of being hypersensitive to social exclusion. It defines adolescence. You cannot tolerate being left out. It's just, it's unimaginable. It feels awful. And I want you guys to pause with me on this and think about yourself, think about your own kids. When you were 7 years old and in 2nd grade, you're hanging out by yourself in the cafeteria, you're eating your PB&J, you're doodling on a napkin, you do not care. And when you're 24, you got your first job, you're reading the Washington Post on your phone, eating your salad, you don't care either. You don't care. You kind of hope nobody sits with you, right? But when you're in high school and you're 13 and 15 and 17 and you're by yourself, every eye in the universe is on you. And you're wondering, is it my hair? Do I smell bad? Is something stupid I said? What's wrong with me? Why is nobody with me? And it is unbearable. There's this notion of a looking glass self that defines adolescence too. I'm not who you think I am. I'm not who I think I am. I am who I think you think I am. This defines adolescence. And this is a terrible issue. It's terrible. And if I have any adults in the room that feel like this, you need a therapist. I need to find you, therapist, rush right there, therapy, right? You need to get out of this state, because this is an okay place to be. But it defines adolescence. It matters so much to you how other people view you. And this is the age of finding your people, finding your herd. And it's the reason why, even though you've taught your kids really well, they're going to be like, sure, I'll do that stupid thing, because it's so important for me to be with you two, more important than taking off my mom, right? And this is why high-risk behaviors happen during adolescence. Okay, third thing that happens during brain development, I covered 2. The final thing is you get the skull cap of the cortex developing. It's the last part of the brain that develops. And the cortex of the brain is where the dopamine receptors get laid down. And you guys know everything about how dopamine interacts and why the brain breaks, so you can understand why all addiction is a developmental pediatric disease starting at this stage, is because that's when the dopamine receptors get laid down. There becomes active at this stage of the game a naturally occurring neuroendocannabinoid called anandamide. And we didn't used to know what this does. It manages mood, it manages contentment, but it also seems to be one of the things that determines what gets pruned and what gets kept. The problem with anandamide is that it is the mirror image to THC, which is the psychoactive cannabinoid in marijuana. Your brain can't tell these 2 things apart. It sees them the exact same way. But interestingly, THC is much stronger, more potent. It's more of a bully neurotransmitter, and it hooks itself into the receptor more aggressively than anandamide. So it's like using a sledgehammer to determine what will be kept in your brain instead of using a scalpel, right? This is the problem with marijuana. Our kids think it's all good all the time. And what do we know as scientists and prevention people is we think this is a neurotoxic drug to the developing brain. What you do with pot in the privacy of your own home, I don't care. I don't want you driving. I don't want you operating on any, babysitting my kids. I don't want you going to work. It's not going to hurt you, and as long as you don't do the other stuff, it's not going to harm society. This is a drug that is going to harm generations because they think it's fun. And if your job is to sell an addictive drug, who is your target audience? You. How old are you?
21.
Yeah, he's their target audience and younger, right? Your job to sell an addictive drug, you've got to get his generation and his generation. That's your target audience. They're not going after you and me, they're done with us, right? So this is the worrisome thing. We have an industry that has tens of billions of dollars at stake, and they're desperate to get young people to believe this is all good all the time. So this has an impact on attention, verbal learning, memory, processing speed, and that stays even when you're not high. This is a very famous Dunedin study from New Zealand that follows 1,000 people, which isn't a huge number, but these studies are hard to do, and it followed them for 25 years. And it took a category of people, which is the gray box, who never used marijuana ever. And I'm going to compare them to the other extreme just to make the point, and that's the people in red, the red bar, who used marijuana 400 times or more during adolescence. Both of this has to do with adolescence, between the ages of 14 and 21. Zero use, 400 times or more in 7 years. 400 times in 7 years, that's not much. That's using once a week, right? I'm not even talking daily use, I'm talking once a week, not much heavy use. So, graduating from university or college by age 25, 36% of the kids who never used graduated from college. 2% of the kids who used 400 times or more graduated from college by age 25. Unemployment rates by age 25. The unemployment rates for kids who never used were 21%. The kids who used 400 times or more, 52% unemployment rate. That's like a generation failing. That's a failure to launch generation. That's your kids living in your house and never getting a job and paying taxes, right? This is very concerning when you see data that looks this way. The problem with this study, and every study we have, it also showed an 8-point drop in IQ by age 35. 8 points is 2 standard deviations. That's a big drop in IQ. Same study, 8-point drop by age 35. The problem with that study is it's based on the old pot. It's based on marijuana prior to 1995. And marijuana prior to 1995 was 3% THC. 3% THC marijuana. THC is the part, the cannabinoid in marijuana that makes you high. There's hundreds of other cannabinoids that do other things, but they don't make you high. So 3% THC marijuana is gone. It no longer exists. It probably doesn't even exist on the planet. It definitely doesn't exist in the US. Every field-grown marijuana plant out there is between 9% and 20% THC. And then you do this to it. You make what the kids know when they think of marijuana. They think of the THC concentrates, right? Shatter, butter, earwax, hash oil. This stuff is between 50 and 90% THC. So you saw that graph. It's kind of concerning about the toxic effects of low potency THC in our kids' brain. They get 20 or 30 times more potent. You think you're getting a healthier brain? You think you're building IQ points? You think you're getting kids who are really like launching their lives? One of the interesting things about the Dunedin study isn't just a measure for me of who goes to college, who is unemployed. They asked the question of, are you satisfied with where you are in your life? And the level of satisfaction amongst the people with high heavy use of marijuana is extremely low. That for me is not living your full potential on the planet. That's the saddest part of it. So, lots of ways to use pot. You can smoke it, you can bake it, you can eat it, you can suck on it, you can put it as a tincture under your tongue. It comes in beer and spaghetti sauce, in capsules, and you can rub it as a cream. It comes in every possible way. The most common way that it gets used is the edibles. And these edibles look like everything your 7 or 9-year-old would want to eat, right? It's wrapped in chocolate, and it's every one of these look-alike candies. This is all stuff from Colorado. Is between 50 and 90% THC. Every one of those candy bars has 12 servings in it. So if you guys can take a Kit Kat, next time you buy one, break it into 12 bits, eat one bit, and the other 11 bits into a plastic bag. That will never happen, because that's crazy, right? When you guys buy a candy bar, most of us think it's 1 serving, sometimes it's 2. It is not 12, right? That's just mislabeling. So here I have a 12-serving candy bar that's 90% THC. And you know, people get super sick, they get super high, they get psychotic, they overdose on marijuana. What we saw in the emergency rooms in Colorado in that first year all the way up to now we're in year 5 or 6 of it being legal, is that the ears are filled with psychotic people, or people in a constant vomiting cycle, right? It's not so healthy for young brains. Or old brains, like an old person will overdose on this stuff too. Massachusetts is required by law to sell edibles in every store. They are required not to have look-alike candies. They're not allowed to have a Kit Kat look-alike or York pepper patty, but they can have it any other way. We're not allowed to sell gummy animals. No gummy bears, no gummy worms, but you can sell gummy any other shape. No gummy animals. Like it was bogus. Our legislation, the ballot measure in November 2016, was written by the marijuana industry. We passed that. So outraged by it. So is marijuana addictive? Well, we used to say back in the old days at 3% THC or lower, it wasn't so addictive. It had a 9% addictive rate. And compared to some of the other substances, that was fairly low. And when you started as a teenager, it was high. It was like 17%. Today's marijuana is about 30 to 50% addictive. The potency of THC is so high that it's 30 to 50% addictive. It's more addictive than nicotine. That's where we are right now. I have been told that you guys are, and I'm not saying the people in this room, but the legislators in Connecticut are all about revenue, tax revenue, because they think that a bunch of money is made, and they definitely don't want that tax revenue going to New York or Massachusetts. Somebody's going to spend it in Connecticut. But my understanding is that you guys are trying to have more conservative measures put forth. Well, here's some easy ones. Age of purchase should be, I don't know, what would you think? 25. Don't make it 21. Be the first state in the nation to say 25 is the right number. And you know what I would argue? I think there should be a THC limit. How high do you need to get, my friends? Washington State has a THC limit. Washington, D.C. said no recreational stores. They said if you want to grow pot and use it, do it. That's fine. We will get no revenue from it. That's fine. But we're not going to do a whole licensure allowance. We're not going to store. We're not going to promote it as a society. Right? There's different states who've done different things. What if Connecticut, if you guys have to do it, what if you did the best one? The best we got, right? Limit the THC, age of first purchase, walking in the store, 25. That's going to take some work, right? It's going to take prevention work, talking to legislators. There's going to be plenty of tax revenue. They'll be fine on their stupid tax revenue. Okay, let's talk about alcohol. I will not underplay this one, right? Because it is harmful. I'm not going to say it's all good all the time, and that's not true. So those kids are right about that. A third of us in this nation never, ever drink ever. A third of us drink very lightly. They drink a week, 2 drinks a month, very light social drinkers. The final 1/3 of Americans drink every drop of alcohol in the entire country. And the final 10% of us drink on average 10 drinks a day. 10 drinks a day. So those people aren't here tonight because you can't get 10. You got a few started already for 10 drinks, right? It's hard to come out and be social. But 10% of people you go to school with, that you work with, the parents you hang out with, 10% of them are drinking on average 10 drinks a day. That's a pretty big number. By anybody's measure, I take care of people with 40 drinks a day, right? I take care of people with significant strugglers. I'm sorry about your picture. You're going to go to the slide deck. Yeah, take the slide deck. Okay. So this is the big issue that we have right now. It's women in wine. Okay, and I'm going to actually say it's white women in wine. This is very racialized. It used to be the case that the ratio between alcoholism, male to female, was 9-1. And this is true for millennia. Women didn't drink. In the last 15 years, the rates of alcohol use disorder have shifted, so it's 6-3 male to women. And that happened in 15 years' time. This is the reason why. Is women talk about whining. My kids are whining, so I'm whining. All these memes. It's very hard to go into a little boutique store anywhere and not have it be about wine and chocolate, right? On every tea towel, every coaster, it has become so normalized. And it is the way that so many of us who have really big, hard jobs, and by the way, we're in charge of everything at home, and I fill out all the school permission slips, and I'm the only one who knows anybody's doctor and dentist schedule, and I make all those appointments, and I'm in charge of the yard and the dog that I didn't want, and all of it, right? And I know there's lots of other women in the room like, yeah, me too. There's a very strong sense of, I deserve a drink, I'm transitioning from my work life to my home life, I need to change how I feel. And the message you send, as all of us, male or female, to your kids when the first thing you do is walk in and flip off the top of a beer can or uncork a bottle of wine is that when you're stressed, when you're overwhelmed, when you're feeling bad, you should drink. That's your solution. That's what the kids see. And what we need to do is walk in the door and be like, I have a terrible day. I want to cry. I'm going to go for a walk. Who wants to go for a walk with me, right? I'm going to go lie down on my yoga mat, which is laying down in the living room. I'm going to hit my 10-minute John Kabat-Zinn mindless meditation, and I'm going to try to get present in my body again. We need to model healthy behaviors ourselves so that our kids can learn healthy behaviors to manage stress, misery, and overwhelmed feelings. And instead, as adults, we do a terrible job with this. I want you guys to think of the last time you went to an adult party where there wasn't a prominent alcohol. The last time you went out with your girlfriends that didn't involve a bar and drinking. Right? Why don't you guys go for a hike? I'm not saying I'm perfect. I go to a bar with my girlfriends too. But more and more, we've as a group said, you know what? One, I can't afford the calories anymore. But two, why is this the go-to for so many women? It is not good for your health, period. I don't care what anybody says. The studies that look at the cardiovascular benefit of alcohol were funded by the liquor industry. The federal government shut down all alcohol studies last year. They said there's no health benefit. We're done with this. There's no health benefit. There's clear harm. It's one of the leading causes of cancer outside of tobacco. I told you the third leading cause of death in our country. There's no health benefit. It's self-medication. And more, I think, as adults, we need to be changing our behavior. And my hope is that happens. And instead, women are getting roped in by the liquor industry to think this is all good all the time. So I have parents saying to me, though, I want to teach my kids a trick. I want them to go to college knowing their limits. And I'm looking at them thinking, these are my friends. I'm like, what? I think, have we been talking? But so they've done studies on this. What does it look like when adults give alcohol to, not talking low teenagers, 17, 18-year-olds. They train them. All it does is it creates kids who have a higher rate of alcohol use disorder or binge drinking. That's all you're doing, right? So don't think that's a good idea. It's also illegal to host a party for underage minors to provide alcohol. You will be arrested for that behavior because it's illegal and you're not helping anybody. So this is the other thing I get all the time, but they drink in Europe super young. They start drinking at 12. They're all good all the time. I'm like, oh, really? Let's look at the World Health Organization data on this. So when you look at the top 25 alcohol use disorder countries in the world, 23 of the top 25 are in Europe. South Korea and South Africa are the only two non-European in the top 25. Starting drinking at the age of 12 is not even healthy. The rates of alcohol use amongst pregnant women in Ireland, 60% of pregnant women in Ireland drink. Fetal alcohol rates in Ireland are 400 times the rate of this country. And I mentioned Ireland because a lot of us are Irish, right? Like I used to work at the South Boston Community Health Center. I think there are Irish people all day. Like there's, we hop over to Ireland. Like it's very familiar. And 60% of pregnant women drink? Like are you kidding me? Doesn't that seem kind of crazy to us? I mean, we would look all askance at a pregnant woman drinking. Most of us think we know it's not good to the fetus. We know this. Okay, third thing that leads to addiction, and I'm going to spend a little time on this only because I have a lot of treatment providers and there are people who work with people. But I said there are three things, and this is the final one, which is the exposure to childhood trauma. So who knows about the ACE score in the room? Yeah, more than the average people do because you guys work in the service entity. But what was interesting is that was maybe 20% of the room. Most people don't know about the ACE study. The ACE study came out in 1996, and it was a survey of 17,000 adults asking 10 questions about what happened to you growing up in your household. That's it. It was done in San Diego County. It was actually mainly white middle class. That happened to be the population that Kaiser studied in this study. 10 questions about what happened to you, yes or no. Okay, and I'm going to read them partly because I have age range in this room that can handle the questions. Okay, there's nothing I'm going to say that's inappropriate, but it's growing up in a household that's chaotic, neglectful, or harmful things happen to you. Did a parent or another adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, humiliate you? Did a parent or another adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you? Were you ever sexually abused? Did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, that your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, support each other? Did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you? Or did you ever feel like your parents were too drunk or too high to take you to the doctor if you were sick? Were your parents separated or divorced? Was there somebody in your household with major mental illness? Was there somebody in your household who was incarcerated? Did you watch your mom or stepmom be physically abused by your dad or stepdad? I may have missed one, but 10 questions, yes or no. If you score a 6 or higher on an ACE score, you've just taken 20 years off your life. Right? You haven't done that intentionally. But people who score a 6 or higher no longer is the average length of life 78. It's 50. Okay? If you score a 4 or higher in ACE score, you have much higher rates of heart attacks, emphysema, asthma, multiple broken bones, multiple sexual partners. I mean, what does asthma have to do with having a high ACE score? Well, guess what? It has everything to do with it. This is a huge predictor of who's going to struggle with addiction. Interestingly, it's actually a big predictor of who's going to struggle with chronic pain. People who get injured who can't get better. You do an ACE score on them, it's through the roof, right? I run chronic pain groups, do a lot of teaching on it. Pathways get set down in the body of trauma, fight or flight, cortisol spiking levels in the brain that have an impact. And this is not a trauma talk, that's a different kind of talk, but this has a huge impact. And guess what? Our kids don't get to change this. Our kids, sadly, have no impact on the ACE score. That's just what they're given. But as a community, and I'm sure this is work that Rushford does, as a community, in a trauma-informed community, a community that has a lot of trauma treatment counselors is absolutely critical. Because trauma does not respond to a drug. There's no drug that helps it. And it actually doesn't respond well to chit-chat therapy either. There's specific kinds of therapies that work for it, but there's also EMDR, EFT, tapping therapy for kids. There's a variety of other modalities of treatment that help this tremendously. There's trauma-informed yoga, but you need to know how to do that. It's very specific. It's actually really hard to be present in your body and have a trauma sport. You're not used to feeling your body. For so long, you've been numb from that. So doing a normal mindfulness exercise, a body scan with people with high trauma doesn't go well. It's complicated stuff. So again, ACE score measures abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. 3 things: genetics, history of trauma, and early exposure. And when I talk to a room full of parents, I just say talk to your kids, talk to them early. What's the average age of first use of alcohol, cigarettes, or marijuana? Yeah, it's 12, 13, or 14. That's exactly right. So that's 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. Right? First talk on this in 10th grade? Whoa, that horse is long gone, right? It's for the 5th grade conversation, really. So our kids, smartest generation we've ever seen, are eradicating paper cigarettes because they're so well educated and they don't want harm. But then lo and behold, this thing happens. In September of 2017, again, lowest rates we've ever seen, juuling, e-cigarettes took off. We've been seeing Juuls and e-cigarettes for about 5 years prior to that, but something happened in September of 2017. It's going to take one smart, high-tech forensic kid to figure this out. 12 things went viral that summer. And I don't know how to do any of this stuff. I don't even know what went viral, but I can trace back some of what happened that summer, that every kid came back to school thinking this is the newest and coolest thing we have ever seen. And that spike, I can't even tell you, from a public health angle, we have never seen a spike this fast, ever. At this point, 1/3 of high school students are using e-cigarettes. 1/3. Now, what is the survey saying now? Do you know? Is it 1/3? So you guys are on the national average, if that seems right. And it's hard, because I'm talking about something that happened just 2017, which means I need 2018, 2019 data. That's only May of 2019. I don't have data yet. But 1/3 means your average. There are towns in Connecticut where 60% of high school kids are vaping. There are towns very south of here. Because you know what it takes to vape? It's money. It's a credit card. In general, it takes people who would say, oh, I have enough in my bank account that I can buy 10 vapes and then sell them at school. Kids I take care of, they can't afford that, right? So my kids go to a poor school district. The vaping rate there is lower than the national average because it's really driven by money, right? So 1/3 of kids now are vaping, and when you ask these kids, well, what are you vaping? I asked my 14-year-old a year ago. I was like, okay, what's in an e-cigarette? And she's like, Mom, you make me nuts. You're so crazy. It's just water vapor and flavor. And I was like, I said, first of all, that's what they say is in there, but we don't know what's in it, right? That's the problem, is this stuff is affected by nobody. And we know there's preservatives in order to keep that flavor and the stuff from not getting cloudy. There's at least 5 or 7 or 12, who knows, preservatives. The one we can name easily is formaldehyde. I don't want formaldehyde, which I only know from like my pickle dissection in high school, which is disgusting. I don't want that in your lungs. We have no data knowing what that stuff does. And lo and behold, when we do the study came out now a little over a year ago, 70 American-made e-juices, the stuff you fill these things up, all labeled 0 milligrams of nicotine. What percent of them have nicotine in them? We brought them to the lab. Almost all of them. 90% of the 0 milligram labeled as such, 90% have nicotine in them, some of which have the equivalent of patent cigarettes. So our kids are being told, or in their own heads are convinced, this is nothing, it's no big deal, it's watermelon and water, it's all good. But yet the industry, this was the American-made stuff. They didn't study the Chinese stuff. Chinese products are 90% of the market. I don't think they're going to have anything better in them. More likely, they're going to have mercury, lead, and other horrible stuff in them, because there's a lot of stuff coming out of China that's very not safe. So here I have American-made products, 90% of which have nicotine in them. Our kids, the smartest generation of kids who are turning their backs on tobacco, are getting backdoored to be nicotine addicts. That's what's happening. Who funds all this? The nicotine industry, right? This is tobacco. Who knows they've lost this generation and they want them back. And so they're just going to lie to their kids, right? And who's going to hold them accountable? Apparently nobody. Right? The Food and Drug Administration started sending out threatening letters in November, like, stop that. But I'm telling you, finger wagging, and the finger wagger, it doesn't actually work. Right? So here are the flavors. There's 600 flavors that you can buy. I just threw up a handful of them, but little tiny apple juice containers that look just like kindergartners' apple juice containers. Little tiny Ready Whip cans that taste like Ready Whip, I guess, and it looks like a Ready Whip can. Vanilla wafer flavor. This is not helping the cross-country truck driver who's trying to quit smoking. They're not buying this stuff. This is intended for our kids. So what would you do to stop this? It takes one thing only. You just ban the flavors. You just say no flavor product. You can sell your product. You can sell your crazy Juul or whatever you're selling, but no flavors. It's also taste. This stuff tastes nasty. It doesn't taste gross, or it has no flavor. It's kind of a harsh thing. They actually combine it into different salts, so it's a little less harsh. But if you get rid of the flavor, this epidemic would be gone tomorrow. And you know who would be smart enough to do it? The state of Connecticut. The federal government won't do it because the federal government's scared of the tobacco industry. But it's going to take one state to say no flavors. And it's going to have to happen locally. The problem is the shutdown of the online business. That would be hard because it's hard to prevent it from getting delivered. But then you go after the Attorney General of Connecticut goes after the companies who are shifting the product in. And Connecticut could be the best public health state in the nation. You guys could do that work. So Juuls never lied. Juuls says we're filled with nicotine. They never tried to deceive them. They said we're super cool. We're like the iPhone. The box is really cool to open. I don't know who's got the new iPhone. The box opens and it's really smooth. I opened and closed mine many times. I was like, that's so nice. But it has that cool negative. This Juul, same way. It's very smartly designed. It's measuring your intake breath. It measures the strength of how much you breathe in. It will deliver you more or less, most often more, knowing that you're not a good sucker, right? And then they'll have you deliver more. It has an iPhone brain inside of it. Every Juul is the equivalent of a pack of cigarettes. Every one. So, interestingly and frighteningly, it's more addictive. Because when you smoke a cigarette, it's the first third that has almost all the nicotine in it. And the final 2/3 it dissipates. Not this thing. It has an even, steady hit of nicotine all the way through the 200 hits. So these things are super addictive. There are people who go to bed with their Juul under their pillow because they are smoking all night long. Now, having said that, at 20 years I've been at this, it's uncommon to be a cigarette smoker who smokes at night anymore. I used to. I'd be like, do you really have to walk your dog in the middle of the night? Are you waking up and withdrawal from nicotine? And then I'm like, well, my dog does need to go out. I'm like, okay, I hear you, but you're waking up at midnight because you're in nicotine withdrawal, so you go outside and smoke with your dog. I hear that. That's how we measure how severe somebody's nicotine addiction is. They have to smoke at night. They can't even get through to the morning, right? But these guys, you have people puffing all night. They're super addictive. And we have kids, they can't get through a school day. You can't get through an 8-hour school day in active nicotine withdrawal. You have to smoke. You have to go to the bathroom and use it, right? You have to go out to your car and then they get suspended, which is not quite the right approach either, right? This is a problem. We have a super addictive chemical that our kids are using. And it's that little tiny USB port that charges into your phone, and it's now interchangeable with a variety of other USB port looking things that don't just have nicotine in them. So the PAC system is this. This was the original makers of Juul, started with PAC. This stuff is 90% THC. That little USB clicks into the Juul. So our kids are just not using nicotine at school. They're using a 90% odorless THC product at school. And it's getting hidden in the bathroom stalls, inside the toilet paper holder because it's magnetic. And if I had a kid walking into school drunk with a couple nips in their pocket, everybody would be freaked out, right? But I have a certain percent of kids who are using a 90% THC product every single day. That's what's happening in our schools. It's very upsetting. That's not just here, it's everywhere. So one of the things I would say as a preventive health people is to know what is in this stuff, and it's worth testing the product because we're seeing more and more THC in it. And there's strips, like the police have them, where they can test what the school resource officer picks up. Super helpful to know that 20% of what has THC positive. That's a game shifter, right? That's sort of like, wow, that's even, it's all bad. Nicotine's bad, but developing brain on THC is also bad. How are you guys doing? You okay? Can we just spend a couple minutes on screens? Who thinks their phone is addictive? Oh yeah. Who thinks their kid has a problem with their phone? Yeah. So this is a great article, Atlantic Monthly, about how smartphones are really harming us. And it's worth going back and reading. And when you get the slide deck, you can look. But half of the kids say they're addicted to their phone. They say my youngest says, I'm absolutely addicted to my phone. It is glued to her phone. I will look at her and be like, stop touching your phone. And she almost can't not have her. And it's facing down and she's touching it, right? It's crazy, yeah.
When you were saying people wake up in the middle of the night to smoke, how many, I heard something recently, like 20% of people wake up and check their phone.
Absolutely they do. And like 50% of kids do it. It's why your kids should not have a phone in the bedroom. I'm not saying I do that. I've not succeeded. I failed as a parent. Like I'm exhausted from the fight. So when you look at this, 72% of teenagers and 48% of parents feel the need to immediately respond to a text, right? It's like a worm in their brain that they feel that buzz and they're like, I must do this right now. Whether they're driving, whether they're having a conversation with their mother at breakfast, it doesn't matter. They cannot help themselves. They must do this thing. They check it at night, all night long. Their sleep is a disaster because their phone is buzzing all night long. About a third of parents and teenagers say they argue about this every single day. It's my number one argument in my house. is sort of the screen time stuff. And the problem is that this defines addiction. These things are compulsive use, continuous use, despite of having cravings and a loss of control. You want to punish your kid? Just take away their phone. It's the only punishment left, right? I mean, I'm not saying that we need to do other punishments, but take away their phone, they can't even survive. They literally, I mean, this is embarrassing. Last night a teenager called me. She's an upper teenager. She's like, my phone died. I said, She said, I'm in the middle of nowhere. She was doing a CPR class in the middle of nowhere. She said, I can't get home. I was like, you don't have an app in your car? She said, no. I don't even know how to read an app. I'm like, oh my God, you're the worst mother ever. And it was a real problem solving in my own head about how to get kids from point A to point B in the middle of nowhere without a phone. And I was like, call from a landline. She's like, a landline? Like, she'd never heard of it. It was crazy. And my husband and I looked at each other like, what is wrong? How did this happen that she can't survive without a phone? So these are my girls, actually. This is Instagram and this is Snapchat. And look at all the little hearts and likes. Like, this stuff is addictive. It is addictive for us, too. We like it when our stuff gets liked on Facebook. We like it when we have many people following us on Instagram. My girls will say, why didn't you heart my post? And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I follow you on Instagram so I know that you're not doing anything horrible. That's the only reason I'm going to check that account. But this stuff is like little tiny dopamine spikes. I feel good. Somebody liked what I said. And it's intended, designed to addict every one of us in this room. Little tiny spikes of dopamine. It's super frustrating.
Try to have a meal in her basket, you know, and get your kids to put.
Yeah, they're not allowed to.
I mean, it's like a war.
It's like a war, right?
Well,
I'm just saying, sit down.
One word that I'll
Yeah, you'll stick to that. No phones at the dinner table, and that stays somewhere. But it's a fight, isn't it crazy?
I work with a high school, and we have a war in the classroom every day.
Yeah.
I mean, some teachers have things out the door they're supposed to put their phones, so some kids refuse to put their phones.
Yeah. They have to have it.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. And it really changed in the last 5 years. 10 years ago, even 7 years ago, this is this generation. Okay, let's just quickly race to the opiates, because that's actually, I think, what people think we're going to talk about. There's no doubt, pills are on the hook for this epidemic. The overprescribing of prescription opiates for the last 20-something years started this thing, and I think most people would agree with that. And when you look at our nation compared to every other nation in the world, we prescribe more opiates almost by twofold, right? Twice as many as Canada. We're the same as Canada. They're fewer in population, but, very similar people, similar diseases, and we prescribe twice as many opiates. It is now the leading cause of death under 50. Death by opiates, drug overdose, is the leading cause of death under the age of 50. It's higher rates of dying than motor vehicle accidents, AIDS, the peak of the AIDS epidemic, gun violence. It's higher than everything at this stage. And it started really, we began watching the overdose rates really spike in the 1990s, and this map starts in 2003. And those red areas are areas where overdoses are happening at high rates. And you watch the whole country start to turn red, and it ended in 2014. 2014 is 2 years prior to fentanyl. Fentanyl arrived in New England in 2016. At this point, the map is deep global in terms of death, with the exception of North and South Dakota. Those two states are pretty good. The rest of the country is really heavily impacted. It's not just New England, Ohio, and West Virginia. And the meds, the pills originally really started to come to us from the fine state of Florida that we used to call I-95 Oxy Highway between 1999 and 2009. For 10 years, we called it Oxy Highway. We being the medical field, we knew what was happening. And people would have these trips, like air-conditioned coach buses, and all your expenses got paid for, and you would go down to Florida, and you two would walk into any one of the 650 pill mills, also called pain clinics, in strip malls in Florida. And you didn't need any diagnosis, you didn't need to limp, you just needed a wad of cash. Hand in your cash, you're handing back several bottles and a stack of strips. You hand that to your tour operator, and then they go back to Maine, Kentucky, and Massachusetts, and Connecticut, and they sell the drugs. 10 years, 11 years, this went on. In 2009, the federal government said, your state is destroying the Eastern Seaboard. You're destroying us, and we will cut off your federal funding for everything. Schools for highways or airports, stop it. And the federal government, DEA, the FDA, jumped in 2010 and shut down the pill mills, shut down almost every one of them. 34 doctors were still serving time in federal prison, as they should, because they weren't doctors, or they were doctors, they were drug dealers. So here we have 2 million, 2.5 million Americans up and down I-95 addicted to opiates, and you just cut off the lifeline. So what are you left with? Yeah, you're left with an unbelievably cheap, pure, and available and deadly drug. That's what you're left with. We're left with a drug that's probably 100 times more killing than pills are. I'm not happy about the pills. I'm glad Florida got shut down. All needed to happen. We were not ready for this. We were not ready for 2011, 2012, 2014. Nowhere in the country was prepared for this. And I'm not saying we could have built the infrastructure ahead of time, but man, we were blindsided when this got shut down and we were left with only this. So that bottom map is before Florida got shut down. Those are states with high overdose rates. And the top map is after Florida. And you just see the map switch, right? And again, it needed to happen. We weren't ready. And this is why so many people are dying. Our real problem now is synthetic opiates, which is fentanyl. So 90% of the heroin in Massachusetts is fentanyl. There are communities where there's no more heroin. It's all fentanyl. It's here in Connecticut too. I don't know if it's 90%. I know my numbers in Massachusetts. But it's really hard now to find anything that used to be 50 to 100 times what a prescribed opiate was. I'm now describing something that's 50 to 100 times heroin. So what we have now for 2.5 years in Massachusetts is this giant spike in fentanyl, and it takes that much fentanyl to kill you. And that little tiny dusting you see there is mixed in with cocaine, it's mixed in with marijuana. I've lost so many people who have a cocaine use disorder to this. And you know, you do the autopsy, that's when you realize, right, the toxicology is fentanyl positive. So we're seeing spiking rates of people dying with a cocaine use disorder because of fentanyl, right? It's not everything's contaminated. And this is just, you know, there's no building a wall that shuts this down. This is not prescribed Duragesic patch fentanyl. This is stuff that gets manufactured in China, and they get shipped to us as packaged. That's all. And there's no way to shut this down. Not easily. I don't know how to do it. So this is our new problem, and this is like just killing. This is, at my last 9 months, I've lost more patients than I've lost in 20 years, just in the last 9 months. How do our kids get opiates? Well, by and large, our kids do not use opiates. This generation is terrified because they are the generation of the opiate epidemic. They read about it on the front page of the paper, they're terrified of it. That's good, that's good. But 10 years ago, it wasn't like that, right? So they used to get the opiates from us, right? They go through the medicine cabinet, they take out everybody's old hydrocodone, Percocet, whatever's left over. So that's so old school, like I almost can't even say it, but if you have old bottles of something sitting around at home, shame on you. Get them out of your house. Please take back boxes, gone. They don't belong in your house. If you're actively using them because you have chronic pain, lock them up. They should never come from you. But again, that's a 2012 conversation. It's now 2019. We've moved on now, right? Connecticut is a state that has these take-back boxes. Not every town, but most towns have them. There are many states, the vast majority, that have no take-back boxes available. They have to wait for that once-a-year DEA take-back. Like, it's the stupidest public health thing ever. In Pennsylvania, my mother-in-law was there. She brings her bag of unused scripts to Massachusetts a couple times a year to get rid of my police station. Pennsylvania has a drug problem, right? Like, what are these other states doing? Our kids get prescribed opiates when they're injured, right? They get their femur fracture, they get a wisdom tooth out, they get their appendix out, they get prescribed something. And our job as loving adults is to look at the prescriber and say, how do I help my child with their pain while reducing their exposure to opiates, talking through it, right? That's all you need to ask. Very simple question. Help my kid with pain, I want as few or no opiates as possible. And it's doable, it's all doable. Now, there's a plan A, there's a plan B, there's a plan C, but they should be able to talk you through it. And we all know that you used to be handed a bottle of a lot, right? For some
60%.
Yeah, 60 or 30 of some, right, for very minor things. So can I just ask anybody in the room for a wisdom tooth or a root canal story, like how much you got and how much you used? Yeah.
Well, I had inflammation in my foot and I went to the doctor and I'd already been working in the field as a case manager. And it was just inflammation and he offered me 30 for 30s.
I'm sorry, did you say 30, number 30, Percocet 30 milligrams?
Yeah.
Wow, that's, I'm sorry, what decade was that, recently?
This was like 2011.
Yeah, right, that's sort of the beginning of the end.
It's really crazy.
Yeah, are you crazy? You could have done quite well for yourself. That's a lot of money right there. That's crazy. Yeah, that's 2011 right there. Terrible.
In Brantford, right here at the HK.
Yeah. Anybody else have a story? Any wisdom tooth positive or negative?
So I have a tooth extraction story, where I needed to have a tooth extracted, and I specifically said I did not want to go through a prescription. But the oral surgeon was like, oh, I don't want you in pain, just take the prescription. And I worked on the prevention council, so I took the prescription, Vicodin, and I was like, okay, I know this is opioid based. So I went to the pharmacy and said, what exactly is in here? And there's nothing in there against inflammation.
Tylenol. It's Tylenol hydrocodone, but not much of it.
Yeah, but not for inflammation, right? So I
because you could have actually, this could have triggered a whole new thing for you, right?
Although I did tell them that I have like low-grade depression.
Yeah.
When I went in and that I was taking
You
some.
could have been high in the realize you feel much better when you use hydrocodone and a whole new path could have started for you. Absolutely, any of those things, absolutely. People who have a significant history of mental health disorder, people who have any opiate or alcohol use disorder or family history of that, you need to be really careful on how you prescribe. In general, people have gotten better. We're not perfect as prescribers, but in general, the numbers that are getting dispensed are lower and lower. But I've asked this question to thousands of people. How many pills did you actually use with your tooth extraction or your wisdom tooth? And the average number, 0, 2, 4, the biggest number I've ever heard is 6. 6, done. Most people use 0 or 2. So you know what should be prescribed? 2, at all. And the way it works in Massachusetts, first of all, you can always take the script home, put it somewhere, and fill it later if you have to, because your brain is out of control. That's a possibility. In Massachusetts, you can do what's called a partial fill. You can bring your script into the pharmacy. It has 6 in it. Right, they wrote for 6, and you can say, I only want 2. The other 4 will sit and wait for you if you need it. Then it's not on you to have to deal with the extra bit. But Connecticut doesn't have a partial fill law that I know. It's a really good public health measure. It allows the patient to have more control at the pharmacy level. It was literally a piece of legislation that went through somewhere. And there's no downside. Nobody gets pissed off about that one.
I know many people who have had their script filled 2 to 4 weeks before their teeth were and took their pills before they even had their
Stop. You're killing me, right? Okay, Narcan, you should have it. Is the library have that thing?
Not yet.
Can I say libraries are really one of the most common overdose sites there is?
There are several stories about libraries in Narcan.
Yeah.
There are lots of them that have.
Lots of them, because it's a public hangout spot with a nice clean bathroom. I'm not gonna shoot up in a library here, I'll go to the bathroom and shoot up. Yeah, convenience stores, Dunkin' Donuts, libraries, absolutely, a public entity should have Narcan, and everybody at the library should know how to use it. That's my opinion. Every public school should have Narcan, and most public schools in Connecticut have done it, but not all of them. And I don't know, when I say most, I don't know, it's less than the majority. Massachusetts, the school nurses just said we're all getting Narcan. They didn't ask anybody, we didn't go to the legislature, I didn't ask my school board, we just got Narcan. And every public school has Narcan. It's driven by the school nurses. We just said, I have 12,000 EpiPens, I've never used, I need 1 vial of Narcan. The company that makes Narcan will give it to any public school for free. I don't know about private schools, but they just give it for free, one a year. So you guys should figure that part out, okay? I'm going to just get rid of the time here. These are books on addiction. People in this room probably read some of these books. If you take care of a lot of people with substance use disorder, a lot of these are good reads. My husband's reading the Gabor Mate book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. That's not even considered the oldest, most classic one. It's beautifully written. I read that one years ago. The book up in blue in the top called The Body Keeps the Score is the best book on trauma I've ever read. You've read that book, haven't you? You agree? It's a great book. And I think anybody who is engaged with helping anybody, whether you're a uniformed officer, you're a doctor, you're a therapist, you need to have read that book. And it will help you help your people more.
I'm going to seek to follow.
Yeah. Did you hang out with him?
And that's what the woman who was there.
Yeah.
And
Did you do his course? Was it good? I've been thinking about doing it. It was fabulous.
It was fabulous.
Good for you.
It was fabulous.
I'm so glad. That's great. Do you do talk therapy? Is that your work? I love that. Do you guys know who she is? Everybody should know who she is and have her name and know who her colleagues are, because she's a unicorn. We need more of this. We need more trauma treatment people, because just look a little bit and it's there. And it helps you understand people so much better. So that's a great book, The Body Keeps the Score. But all these books are good. So I have a website, it's my name, RuthPotee.com, and on that website are articles, video. Like if you say, I've got this, I'm doing middle school talk, I'm going to set it up for the fall, and I'm going to power through. I have a middle school talk videotape there, me talking to Gloucester High School, middle school kids. And it just, you can practice it ahead of time, you can email the website and say, can you send me the middle school slide deck? And you'll get the one I did, or maybe I would have upgraded it. But then you can add in whatever else you want. You can add in different stuff and make it yours, make it a little more Connecticut-based, make it something else, and then go give the talk. But there's video online that you could practice with first. There's tons of articles. There's articles on trauma. I do a lot of correctional help because I'm working in jail. Lots of articles on correctional help. Connecticut in some ways is a little ahead on correctional help, has been historically, has taken a little bit of a step back, is now moving a little forward. So you guys actually led some way and then got pulled back. I'm sure it has to do with who's in office at the time, to be honest with you. Good. So anybody wants a slide deck, how are we going to get it?
Before you leave, there's a sign-in sheet. Make sure you fill it out, write your email as soon as possible, and I will start a mailing list and send that.
neat as possible. That is really critical. It's hard to read those things. Okay, you had a question for me earlier.
I have a question about how addiction affects learning.
Yeah.
Especially, I have a lot of students, I'm a special education teacher, a lot of the students were born with fetal alcohol syndrome, and I just really don't know, how does that affect learning, and what can, I want to try to explain that to my fellow colleagues, because they're like, no, they're doing it on purpose.
So there's a lot of fear about exposure to substances while pregnant, and it's very appropriate. Like, we really try to limit toxins to the pregnant mom, right, for the development fetus. And, a lot of us grew up in the crack baby age of the 80s, that those babies were going to destroy the planet, et cetera, et cetera. But it was really, that was based on racism in classes. And cocaine actually harm to the long-term development of a child is really quite low. It was actually very low in fact. It disrupts the actual pregnancy with higher risk of a preterm labor, of abruption. And having a baby at 30 weeks is way less good than having a baby at 40 weeks. You want the babies to cook as long as possible. They do better when they cook longer. So the most harmful drug in general is alcohol. Alcohol is really, really harmful, and it leads to significant learning disability, significant. The statistics on fetal alcohol syndrome in this country is about probably 1% of kids have it, but we don't diagnose it well because it's not easy to diagnose. If I have a kid who clearly meets all the facial stigmata of fetal alcohol syndrome, I walk in a room and I'm like, fetal alcohol. I mean, I literally blurted it out because it's so obvious, like from a textbook when you see it. Most kids don't have a textbook. They have very subtle findings, right? Their mom wasn't drinking a half handle of vodka a day. They were drinking less than that, but it's still that fine. And really, the long-term outcome is significant learning disability, significant. Every one of those kids need early intervention and lots of support. We've been studying opiates exposure during pregnancy, and I'm going to use them all. I'm going to say heroin use and exposure to buprenorphine or methadone, two of the treatments for opiate use disorder during pregnancy. We've been studying that for 20 years. We've been doing this work at Boston Medical Center, respiratory training, for a long time. Those kids do fine. We get early intervention for everyone, though, because we're just trying to give them family support. But those kids have not shown a marked developmental delay, a marked learning issue in the classroom. But what's hard to tease out is a lot of these kids aren't thriving, but they're growing up in kind of chaos, right? They may or may not have been taken away by the state. They may have gone through 4 foster homes. Their mom or dad may still be actively struggling. Maybe we live with multiple family members. It's hard to tease all of the chaos and the ACE score out of these kids' lives. So ACE scores, having a high trauma score, this is how it looks in the classroom. The kids tend to be inattentive. They tend to have attention issues. They tend to have a lot of impulse control. They tend to have a lot of disruptive behavior. What is all this sounding like? ADHD, right? So trauma seen in the classroom looks like ADHD. It's not ADHD. It's high trauma. And giving that kid a stimulant ain't helping them. In fact, probably going to harm them, right? And so this is a really critical thing. ADHD has got to be diagnosed extremely well, right? By qualified people with lots of input from parents and teachers and watch over a period of time and not give a diagnosis to a 5-year-old, right? But you got to figure out if this kid has high trauma because it looks a lot the same. So those kids struggle to learn. A kid with high trauma, which then may be associated with parental or in utero substance use, right? It doesn't have to do with the drug, but it has to do with the lack of attachment, even in an in utero experience, right? Like for some of us in this room who have happy, joyful, planned pregnancies, we felt very connected to this thing inside of us, right? It was a positive experience. But if you can imagine not that experience, right? An assault, totally unplanned pregnancy, a feeling of, oh my God, this is yet another problem, the state's going to take this away. That's a lack of attachment. That has a high trauma score associated with it, which doesn't do well in the classroom. Super complicated answer, right, to a really good question. But
marijuana.
we don't know, we know nothing. But I'm going to tell you, I've been talking to the OBs about this because the use of marijuana amongst pregnant women is unbelievably high. Because they think it's good, right? They're like, it's fine, I help my morning sickness. In Colorado, the stores tell pregnant women to smoke. I am telling you, when you look at the neuron disruption that marijuana is doing, you think that's not happening during the development of the brain. Pregnant women, I say no marijuana use. You are growing a brain in there. Why do something that's going to interrupt that at all? And until we have studies that study it, just don't use it, right? I mean, that's how we grade drugs for pregnancy. We grade the ones that have been studied. The other ones we're like, we don't know what the heck this does, and we know this one's really bad. This falls in the, we don't know what the heck this does, so you should not be doing it. But it's incredibly commonly used. Can I talk to you guys about CBD for a minute? Okay, because I get that one. So CBD, see it everywhere, right? You walk into a store, you walk into like a convenience store, they're selling CBD creams, oils, food, mix it into your smoothie, truffles, and now where have you seen CBD? Gas station, everywhere. So true CBD stands for cannabidiol, and again, there's hundreds of cannabidiols out there. True CBD comes from the hemp plant, right? Not from the marijuana plant, although marijuana has many CBDs in it. Hemp is defined as having 0.03% or less THC. Very low amounts of THC, and the rest is a bunch of different CBDs. So a different kind of product. Marijuana has any number of things. It has hundreds of cannabinoids. It has a whole varying level of THC in it. They're different products. Now, can you get a near pure CBD oil from a marijuana plant? You can. It takes a lot of extraction. And most marijuana stores aren't interested in selling that, right? They want you to get high. So they're not promoting. When I showed you that picture of how much the THC had grown, did anybody notice the CBD line it never changed? Super flat. Nobody's growing a plant that's higher CBD for any number of reasons. They're just growing the stuff that makes you hot, okay? So CBD from the hemp plant is theoretically what you're seeing out there. But is it what we're seeing? I don't know, because nobody inspects this stuff. It is certified by no one. And when they've done studies, and there's another recent study, this one just came out a month ago, they took 80 CBD oils from reputable companies online that had good reputations. They weren't just what you bought at the gas station. They took 80 of them. A third of them had what they said in it. A third of them had basically nothing, like all of them that cost a lot of money. And a third of it had a whole bunch of other stuff, CBD, THC, who knows, right? This is a buyer beware market. Nobody knows what's in this stuff, nobody's testing it. And I am very ambivalent about it. It's great if you think your source is awesome. Where do we think CBD oil from the hemp plant helps people? It seems to help people with anxiety a little bit. It seems to help people with insomnia. It seems to help some people with pain. Super helpful, right? I need help with all of those things. And so putting 2 or 3 drops under your tongue, if that helps you, and I know it doesn't have loaded with THC and it's going to get my 90-year-old patient super high and fall and break a hip, I'm willing to try that. So what we need to be advocating for is that these products need to be inspected. Why is this not under the Food and Drug Administration? There is one CBD company out there who sends their product to an independent lab to be inspected. That's better. Like, if I had to buy this stuff, if I were living with chronic pain and I wanted to try it, I would buy it from this one company. I have no financial stake in anything. I do know of only one company. But you guys know that when you buy a supplement at the Whole Foods store, any store, who knows what's in that product? You can have cat poop in it. But there is an independent inspector. It is a stamp on the bottom of every company that said, I will pay the extra money to have all my products inspected by this independent inspector that says that what is in my pill is really what is in my pill. And that is the only one you should purchase. Whole Foods, I'm not promoting them, but they do a good job of carrying the better quality products. And probably your local co-op does a better job. They don't carry the real junk. You would never buy anything you swallow at the Dollar General. Right? Don't do that. But whenever I go to the stores, I'm very aggressive. I'm like, show me that this has been independently inspected by somebody, or show me the stamp, because I can never find it, and then they'll show it to me. Or they'll say that one hasn't, and I'm like, done, put that one away. Why are you selling that, right? Because who knows what's in it. So CBD's everywhere. We don't really know what's in it. It really could have THC in it, or it could have olive oil. You spent $60 on that. Bluebird Botanicals or Bluebird CBD is this only company I know at this point that gets their stuff independently inspected. So if you were going to try it, I would at least go to that one company. I have no financial stake in anything. I just know that as a fact. Okay? Is we're calling them. Call Charlotte's Web and say, do you have your product inspected by somebody else, please? Because they should. It's outrageous that this is not. Anyway, you guys have had a long night. I'm sorry I talked for such a long time. Thank you for having me.